"You're not supposed to be here," Craig said, like I'd wandered into the men's locker room instead of the executive Zoom call. He grinned, smug, sharp, like he'd caught the janitor trying to use the espresso machine. "Finance doesn't need babysitters anymore." I almost laughed. Because if Craig knew what I'd built, if he knew the system he signed off without reading, he'd have deleted that smile in real time. But he didn't. He fired me first. And that's where his story ended. Craig wasn't always the villain. When I joined the company, he was the CFO who believed in innovation. Or at least, that's what his LinkedIn said. In reality, Craig believed in one thing: control. The kind that looked polite in meetings, but felt like a leash in every decision. I worked in finance operations, quietly building the company's internal automation tools. Most people thought I just made spreadsheets dance. But I was designing something bigger. A predictive analytics system that could track spending patterns, forecast risks, and flag corruption before it happened. A silent guardian for the company's money. Craig liked that, until he didn't. The moment he realized the system was smarter than him, everything changed. He started locking me out of meetings, forgetting to CC me on strategy calls, and taking credit for every update that worked. When the board praised the new Craig optimization suite, I knew he hadn't just stolen my work, he'd branded it. I told myself it didn't matter, that my job was to make things work, not chase credit. But then Craig made his biggest mistake. He decided to trim the fat, and I was at the top of his list. He called me into HR with a smirk and said it was nothing personal. But for me it was. Because he didn't just fire me. He fired the person who built the one system that could expose him. The day Craig fired me, I walked out with nothing but a box of desk junk and a USB drive he didn't know existed. It wasn't theft, it was insurance. Inside that drive was the first build of my analytics engine. The one before Craig's team watered it down and buried half its capabilities under compliance restrictions. Craig wanted control. I wanted truth. And truth was buried in the data. For a few weeks, I did nothing. Just watched the LinkedIn posts, the press releases, the company's shiny new transparency initiative, with Craig's face plastered across every announcement. He was untouchable. The kind of corporate god who smiled on camera and cut people quietly behind the scenes. But systems don't lie. And mine was still watching. Even after I was gone, my code lived on in the infrastructure, an unnoticed subroutine buried deep in finance ops. It was still collecting data, still flagging unusual transactions. And a month after my firing, I started seeing patterns. Payments routed through shell vendors. Consulting fees that didn't match deliverables. Numbers that curved perfectly toward one account, Craig's. I spent nights piecing it together, line by line, transaction by transaction. Every transfer, every duplicate invoice, every error, that somehow benefited the same name. By the time I was done, I had enough evidence to end his career twice over. But I didn't want revenge that small. No. I wanted something cleaner. Something poetic. So I rebuilt the system. The full version, the one Craig never let me deploy. And when it was ready, I set it loose inside the company's public transparency dashboard. The next morning, everyone, from interns to investors, would see exactly what Craig had tried to hide. The upload took 6 minutes. That's all it took to turn a decade of corporate illusion into a bonfire. My system wasn't just a database, it was designed to show everything. Visual patterns, trend maps, real-time cash flow anomalies. You didn't need a finance degree to see what Craig had done. It was painted in red across the screen like digital bloodstains. By 9 a.m., the dashboard went live. By 9:07, the first Slack messages started flying. Is this real? Did anyone authorize this update? Why are there flagged transactions under Craig's name? I wasn't there to see it in person, but my friend Mia was. She sent me screenshots, each one better than the last. Craig's face turning from smug to skeletal in the all-hands meeting. He tried to spin it, of course. Called it a data error, a system glitch, a misinterpretation of internal transfers. But my code didn't glitch. It verified. Every number had a signature, every signature had a timestamp, and every timestamp traced back to him. Within an hour, the board demanded an emergency audit. By noon, the legal team froze his accounts. That night, I watched the stock ticker dip for the first time in months. Investors weren't angry. They were scared. Craig's empire had been built on efficiency. Now everyone saw what that really meant. Manipulation, siphoned bonuses, and falsified returns. And still, I didn't feel satisfied. Watching him burn wasn't the point. The point was proving something bigger. That you could steal ideas, silence people, and bury truth. But only for so long. Eventually the system always recalibrates. Craig thought he'd fired a problem. He had no idea I'd already programmed his downfall into the company's DNA. By the next morning, the company was in full crisis mode. Legal memos, audit requests, and panicked Zoom calls filled every inbox. Craig, the man who once bragged about efficiency through control, couldn't control a single thing anymore. His calendar was cleared by noon, and his executive assistant stopped answering calls by 2. The man who loved visibility had suddenly vanished from every internal channel. Meanwhile, I stayed silent. No gloating. No leaks. I just watched. Because Craig's downfall wasn't a headline, it was a process. Over the next week, my system kept working, quietly scanning deeper than any human auditor ever could. It found offshore accounts, hidden subsidiaries, inflated project costs that conveniently circled back to Craig's inner circle. Each discovery triggered automatic reports, sent directly to the company's compliance officers and eventually the SEC. I didn't need to lift a finger. Craig's empire was dismantling itself. Mia told me that during one particularly tense meeting, Craig tried to blame the interns. Said someone must have tampered with the algorithm. But then the compliance lead projected the audit logs onto the main screen. Every line of code was signed with his credentials, every override, executed from his terminal. Silence. Craig tried to speak, but the board chair cut him off. "We're done here," she said. And just like that, he wasn't the CFO anymore. 2 days later, a company-wide email went out. Effective immediately, Craig Turner has resigned to pursue other opportunities. Corporate speak for he's finished. But the part no one saw, the part that mattered most, was what came after. The system Craig tried to erase became the foundation of the company's new model. They rebranded it as Athena, the financial intelligence framework that ensures transparency, accountability, and ethical oversight. They gave it awards. They gave it press. And they gave me a call. The new CEO wanted to bring me back, not as an analyst but as director of data integrity. I didn't answer right away. I just looked at the offer and smiled. Craig had built walls around his power, and my system had turned those walls into windows. Now everyone could see through. I went back, not out of pride but closure. Walking through those glass doors again felt strange. The same lobby, same polished floors, but everything felt different. People didn't whisper anymore. They nodded. Some even smiled. Craig's old office was empty, stripped of his leather chair and ego. In its place sat a modest workstation, mine. On the wall behind it, a plaque read, ** transparency isn't a policy. It's a system. **. That line came from my code documentation, the one Craig once called too idealistic. Now it was company culture. When the new CEO welcomed me, she said, "We're building on your foundation." I didn't correct her, but I knew the truth. We were rebuilding from Craig's ruins. Over the next few months, Athena became more than just a tool. It became a compass. Employees trusted it. Departments used it to self-audit. Bonuses were fair, contracts clean, and every transaction traceable. I'd done what Craig never could. I'd created something that ran on accountability instead of fear. One night, long after everyone had gone home, I opened the archived audit logs one last time. Craig's name was still there, buried in the data. His downfall preserved as part of the system's history. I didn't delete it. I wanted it to stay. A reminder that truth doesn't disappear when you silence the people who see it. Before I left, I typed one final line of code into Athena's system core. // never let power go unchecked. Then I closed the laptop. Craig built a company that served him. I built a system that outlived him. And that was the real revenge.